Hi.
Was that a for me, or is that a private
Good afternoon.
Because I'm on the record.
Yeah,
Okay, do you have to say on the record, off the record? So
Awesome.
I know what's going on.
thank you.
We'll tell you when I start recording.
On the record.
We're on the record.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is the City of Kingston Rent Guidelines Board public hearing. Today is Saturday, June 17th. It is 1:02 p.m. And I am pleased to call this hearing to order. We'll start with a reminder to please silence your cell phones. And let's do a quick roll call of members. Noah Kipley-Ogman, Chair, I'm present. Diana Lopez.
Here.
Mia Nuye.
Here.
Michael Brown is not here. Anthony Jr. Tampone. Tara Perry is not here. Michael Tierney.
Here.
Carol Soto.
Here.
Arlene Puentes.
Here.
I want to start today by thanking all of you for attending, and I am looking forward to hearing from many of you as you offer insights and research that are relevant and important for this board's deliberations and decision-making on Wednesday. Because there are a variety of opinions that are strongly held in this room, I would like to encourage and remind us to be respectful for each other. In particular, I will not tolerate interrupting the speaker, and we will ask people who repeatedly interrupt the speaker to leave. We have set a speaking limit of 3 minutes for individuals and 5 minutes for people who are representing an organization. We will hold pretty closely to those limits, so I will start cutting you off. And after speakers speak, the board is likely to ask questions, so stay at the mic for a minute until the board is done asking you questions. With that said, is there anything else that I'm forgetting, Bartek in particular? All right. We are going to start by calling the list of speakers who signed up in advance by sending an email to the DHCR email for this board, at which point we will turn to the sign-up sheet in the back. So Bartek, if you could drag me one of those, thank you. Let's start with Mayor Stephen T. Noble.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to speak. As mentioned, my name is Steve Noble. I'm the mayor here in the city of Kingston. I'm really so proud of the work that we've been able to do as a city to be able to not only bring rent stabilization to our community and to be able to help protect our tenants, but also the work that we've been able to do to support our landlords, both large and small here in the city. And so that's what I'm going to speak about briefly today. I'm here to be able to let you all know my feelings on any rent increase for the upcoming year. And at this point, based on all of the facts and research that my team has done, I feel confident that a 0% rent increase is the appropriate rent increase. And I'll explain to you why. One, during my tenure for the last 8 years, the city of Kingston has continued to reduce our commercial taxes here in the city of Kingston to their lowest tax rates ever since before 2015. And so that's, I think, something that the city can really be proud of, and something that no other communities have done in terms of actually trying to lower taxes. And so we have done that for our small and large institutions here in the city. We've also been able to capitalize on federal funding to be able to help assist our landlords at the same time. We have a brand new $1 million fund that we have set up to be able to assist our landlords to be able to reinvest in their properties. You can have a grant of up to $160,000 to be able to renovate 3 of your apartments at $60,000 each in return for helping to keep those apartments affordable. And so for small landlords, that can go a really long way in being able to help improve the quality of living in those apartments, but then also making sure that rents are not going up in those apartments. We also have worked to be able to think outside the box on how we can make sure that rents stay stable while landlords can afford to maintain and keep up their property. And so we have encouraged our property owners to enter into regulatory agreements, and both myself and the Kingston Common Council have been very supportive of signing on to these regulatory agreements, which in essence take a property and they take them off of the traditional tax roll. And they allow them to be able to be assessed based on how much revenue a property generates. And so if you charge lower rents, you pay less in taxes. And so as many of you have heard, we have our largest housing complex in the city of Kingston, over 266 units that have now are in the process of entering into that agreement. And in return, they will receive tax savings so that they can reinvest those back into the apartments and also make up for any lost rental revenues that they may have because it's now no longer a market rate apartment. And so I encourage all of our landlords here in the city of Kingston to take advantage of that effort. And that is why I strongly feel at this point in time, based on our current economy and what we are doing locally to help protect our small landlords, that a 0% rent increase is the appropriate rent increase here in the city of Kingston. And so those are my comments, and that's the message that I'd like to deliver today.
Thank you so much, Mayor Noble. Are there questions from the board?
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott Lanzarone.
Yeah, hi, I'm Scott Lanzarone. I'm an owner. I live at 183 Wall Street. Despite what the mayor just said, costs of just about everything have gone up. It's a fact of life. You might have heard about it in the news. If you think a 0% increase is going to be doing anyone any favors, you've been misled. You think you're sticking it to the landlords? You're not. These buildings need plenty of upkeep, plenty of help, and in the end, you're just going to be doing it for good tenants here in Kingston. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. Can you? Are there any questions for Scott?
Do you as a landlord, do you operate any of the buildings that are under review this board?
I'm involved in the management one. Yes.
Did you comply with the, did you fill out the petition about your costs and expenses for that property?
I think Mia is referring to the initial rent or the initial building registration form.
We did in a roundabout way. Yes, we submitted it through a significant rehabilitation application.
I'm not understanding.
We submitted that information with a significant rehabilitation application for the building.
Does that mean that you did not file the initial regulation, but instead filed the forms asking for an exemption from ETPA? Okay, right. So you did not file an initial regulation or an initial building registration, and you chose instead to apply to have the building removed from the list of buildings covered by the ETPA.
Correct. We applied for a significant rehabilitation. 142, 144 St. James Street.
Any other questions? Great, thank you.
Chairman, I don't think the microphone is.
Thank you, Bartek. Thank you, Michael. Rich Lanzarone for the Hudson Valley Property Owners Association. And just as a reminder, because Rich is here representing an organization, we are going to allow 5 minutes. Do you appreciate that?
I would ask you to turn to page 3. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Rich Lanzarone. I'm the Executive Director of HPPOA, and I represent the owners of the 53 regulated properties in Kingston. I would like to unmask 3 myths, 3 pervasive, untrue narratives about apartments in Kingston. 1, COVID-19 caused a massive influx of people, and this caused a drop in the vacancy rate. 2, incomes in Kingston have been stagnant and have not kept up with rents. 3, rents have skyrocketed and are unaffordable. I will also show you actual multifamily operating cost data, which DHCR did not give you. On page 3, according to the Empire Center for Public Policy, New York State had a net loss of 300,000 people last year to other states. And in the last 2 years, had a net loss of 651,742 people, a net loss exceeding the combined populations of Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse. Was Kingston somehow immune? No. You can turn to page 4. The chart published by the Census Bureau last month shows the population gains and losses for each city and town in Ulster County from the start of COVID in April 2020 to July of 2022. Kingston, highlighted in yellow, went up by 179 people in 2021, but lost 286 people in 2022. That's a combined net loss of 148 people since the beginning of COVID. The data shows that the narrative about a great influx is a widely believed and repeated, but misleading and false narrative. Yes, people moved in, but more people moved out. Wages, you can turn to page 6, please. Page 6, which is from the Ulster County website, drawing on New York State Department of Labor wage and employment data, shows that average wages have risen from 45,746 to 56,821, an average gain of 24.2% since 2019. This average is reflective of smaller wages for white-collar workers and larger wages for service workers in, say, food service, restaurant, hospitality, and landscaping. Those wages have increased upwards of 30%, according to New York State Department of Labor. This is consistent with the data provided by DHCR on June 12th. The narrative that wages have been stagnant is obviously misleading and false. There are those who need public assistance to pay their rent, no question. And they should be aided by expanded Section 8 and New York State housing voucher programs. But a small number of private property-owning citizens should not be forced to provide a public benefit that government is obligated to provide. If you could turn to page 7. This is the data that was provided to you by DHCR. According to DHCR, rents over the past 6 years through 2021 have increased annually by 2% per year, a total of 12%. Meanwhile, the average renter's household income rose by 33% over the same period. This data clearly dispels the narrative that wages have been stagnant and haven't kept up with the rise in rents. You can turn to page 8. The RGB has jurisdiction over 19% of the apartments in Kingston. The other 81% are beyond RGB's authority. HVPOA conducted a survey of apartment rents in the 53 regulated building, comparing rents being charged on the day before ETPA was adopted to the rate of 80% of area median income for 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments. That's the same rent being charged today. 80% of AMI is the government standard used to determine what is, quote, an affordable apartment. 1,054 out of 1,116 eligible, 94% of the apartments were surveyed. The results reveal that 91% of the regulated apartments are below 80% of AMI. 7% are at 80% of AMI. 1% are above 80%, but below 90% of AMI, and 1% are above 90% of AMI, meaning that 98% of the regulated apartments are already at or below, mostly below what is considered an affordable apartment by government standards. So the narrative that rents have skyrocketed and somehow need to be lowered by regulated action is without merit.
Thank you, Rich. Will you send the remainder of your comments to the board's email address?
I have the address, but I don't think I spent 5 minutes.
It's been 5 minutes.
Yeah, I set a timer.
Just one more thing.
No, Rich, sorry, we're going to hold everybody equally to the time limits. And I really appreciate you coming, and I appreciate that you could send the remainder of your testimony to, but stay up here, we can ask you questions.
Okay, sure.
Rich, I just want to clarify that you are the executive director of the HVPOA, which is an entity that is suing the city, the state DHCR, and this board, asserting that this board was improperly created. I just wanted to make sure that we great,
Yes, that's
thank you.
good. Yeah.
Any other questions for Rich?
So, we've been informed by DHCR that very, very few properties have filed initial registrations and given us their rent and cost data. If you're representing all of these property owners, how come we haven't gotten that pertinent and important information that we need to make decisions based on?
We encouraged all of our members to file registration information. For one thing, the state has the wrong number of properties. They have included a bunch of properties which are really not going to belong on that list. That's number one. There's only 53. And also, the other issue is, so we can't force them to register. That's number one. Number two, in terms of the cost data, the process of submitting the cost data was very problematic for those who attempted to do it, because they had to first request log-on credentials, which were delayed it was a hassle getting the credentials, so they couldn't actually submit the data.
I mean, they've all been know that they need to do this since August of last year. So I mean, I feel like that's a very, very long time to be waiting for credentials. You're saying
No,
people
that's
still have not been able to-
that's about the cost data. As I said, all we can do is encourage. We gave instructions. I did give a suggestion to DHCR, the Commissioner Woody, that perhaps he should do some outreach and do some training, do Zoom training for the affected property owners in how to complete their registration, because it's quite involved.
I have to agree that outreach would be fantastic. Could you, in any capacity that you can, submit as public comment, if you can't do it for DHCR, some type of operating data so that we can have some idea on the types of challenges that even the people you represent might be in, because we have nothing to support your argument in any way, and it unfortunately
Well, actually.
It doesn't help what you want.
Well, actually, the part of my testimony that I was cut off was to talk about the cost data. So you have it actually, you have it there. You have 19 pages of cost data of what it costs to operate, what the changes in cost for operating multi-family buildings were last year.
Thank you, Rich. And please do send that by email so that it can become part of the public record.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right. Thank you. Joel Kaminsky.
My name is Joel Kavinsky, and we have a property out on 22 Stuyvesant Street. I just want to talk about inflation, which has been in the news last year or two. I have some figures here. These are taken from July of 2020 to the present time. So our friends at Central Hudson, electrical rates have gone up 141%. Their gas prices have gone up 4.25%. Kingston water and sewage rates have been up 13%. Insurance costs are up 15.4%. And as the mayor was saying, the tax rates are basically, school was down a little, property tax was up to 2.3%. So basically you're seeing that the costs to run a multi-family have gone up over the last 2 years. And being that's the case, we would hope that the rents would be increased rather than staying at zero. Okay.
Thank you, Joel.
Questions?
Sorry, before you ask me, Joel, I wanted to confirm that you do that as the Flynn House, the entity that owns 22 Stuyvesant, you are a plaintiff in the lawsuit challenging this board's decisions in the fall and also challenging the city's enactment of a housing emergency. I just wanted to make sure that is here. Yeah.
So your property at 22 Stuyvesant Street is affected by the ETPA?
Yes.
And did you file the initial registration and compliance with the law?
October, paper and certified.
Okay,
So
great.
I was still trying to figure out how to do it online because it's very confusing.
The first one you can't do online is one of the things that we learned. Okay, great.
I'm talking about the re-up for this year. So they've got 3 different phone numbers. I call them all. We're talking to the wrong person. So it's bureaucracy.
I'd encourage you to submit that information as comment to the board in the event that it has not been properly sent, or else we won't have it to make a decision on it.
But well, in last October, the paper.
Yeah, the individual registration, but for we don't have 2023 data, as you said, right? Yeah. Anything you can do to make sure that we have that would be great. Right. Okay.
Thank you, Joel.
Sure.
Michael Caslin. We will come back to you, Michael, if you're not here. Irene Lavido Caslin. Also not here. Bob Dittus. Okay.
Dave, I have had properties in Kingston here for the past 40-some years and never really had a big problem with over rent prices. Seems like our prices have always been fair and in keeping with the cost of living. But unfortunately, we've got inflation and that's caused a bit of a skew in the charts here. And our fuel, Central Hudson hasn't been fair to us in many ways. Getting charged for somebody else's utilities, I think. But I know the city of Kingston has tried to keep everything within reason. I will say this. I see a brand new street out here that follows right by one of my houses at 96 Clinton. And my thinking is maybe we should think more instead of putting the fine tuning on these streets to put it into housing. And we certainly could use more housing. We're a sanctuary city, we've invited people here. That's all well and good, but we don't have the accommodations. So consequently, there's been some new landlords moved into Kingston of the past 10 years, and they just feel they can charge much more for rents than we charge the past board. So I'd like to plead to the committee that you keep in mind that our costs have gone up to get anything done by a plumber or a tradesman. Unless you want to be doing it all yourself, which I did in the first 30, but after that, so I'm kind of semi-retired. I still enjoy taking care of my tenants, and they enjoy being my care people. So I had them volunteer many times. They don't see rent increases if I can help it, and they don't mind volunteering to help. So, and I pay them when they do. Just like to say, I hope it's all resolved. Rich has got some good validity here in what he's saying. I back him up 100%. We don't need any more government interfering with private industry, if you will. And I think the tenants that are here, that are being overcharged, they should have their situation addressed. And the rest of us, we do need to make increases as we see fit. That's what we've been doing. Thank you.
Sorry, 1 second, Bob.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming. I just wanted to confirm you are a party to the lawsuit
I certainly
against this board. Okay, great. Any other questions?
You own a property that's under. For this work,
The last word.
you own a rent stabilized property, one of the properties that are covered under ETPA in the city of Kingston.
I would think so. I did paperwork for
What property?
96 Clinton Avenue is one of them. It's right down here on the corner. Clinton Franklin.
Is that the only one?
No, I have 189 Early Avenue, which I've owned for about 40 years.
I'm sorry, you said 109, really?
189. Yes.
And you filed the initial registration?
I certainly did.
Thank you. One other question, on any of these properties, is energy or utility costs included in your rents?
At 96 Clinton Avenue, I paid for everything. At 189 Early Avenue, my tenants pay their own electric, that's all, which is just their lights, air conditioning.
So you cover heat?
I cover the heat, I cover the water, I cover the storage. I cover the fresh air they can breathe. Everything.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Kathy Dittis. I can't make it, so it's not going to come. Harris Safier. Will return. Carla Mazzeo.
Hello. Sorry, shirt broke, so
Are you able to make the microphone closer to you?
yes, because that. Okay, my printer broke, so I have to fortunately read it off of my phone. I am not in Kingston, but I am in Ulster County. So I'm not, I think, part of technically a situation that's happening here. But I would like to speak about some of my experiences, if I can. I represent both tenants and landlords. I care about everyone, and I believe in rational and proper discourse to resolve issues. I have been a tenant for over 14 years in many states across the country. More recently, I've been a landlord. I run a small mom and pop rental. I'm a professional in the community and I understand both situations. I do not want to be here today, but I have to. I've been recently the victim of unprovoked property destruction and harassment for years. I have incurred great expense and financial loss. Unprovoked and in the shadows, I have received threats from tenants that the harassment and property destruction will continue. I had a tenant witness and write a letter of support on my behalf. This has been going on for many years. There is no reason for the harassment. No one has come forward to express any personal or professional concern with me. And why would it really not help me every time a destructive event happens? As a landlord, it appears that I have no protection, no rights, no recourse. I've had police, tenant, and maintenance reports. How can I live under these circumstances? In my hands are tied without protection or financial recourse, I will remain at the mercy of whatever illegal behavior is directed my way. What does that say about fair policies? In the many years of being a landlord, I have consistently rented under fair market value. I have also tried to create a sense of community. I am not a slumlord. I am a professional, and I've always reinvested in my property. I'm not making a profit, but I have all the strength. I'm not the 1%. I'm not greedy landlord. That is extreme thinking. I believe in human diversity and biodiversity. I believe and care about the community, and I fear that we are going to be pushed out of the rental business and that large corporate companies are going to take over. That will be a very sad day for many, both tenants and small mom and pop rental shops. So I ask you today, how can we work together? What about the multitude of failed businesses and abandoned buildings that could be converted for rentals? What are the resolutions? How can we hold both bad landlords and tenants accountable? How do we end fighting and work together as a community? How do we assess individual differences and hold personal accountability?
Thank you, Carla. I appreciate it. We would appreciate if you could send the remainder of your remarks by email to this board. I'm sorry for your experiences. I wish that you didn't have them.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, this board's responsibility is, and this board's ability is to set one specific figure, which is to set an adjustment to the rents of regulated apartments in the city of Kingston. And this board has nothing outside of that purview that it can do. And I hope that you find folks who can be more helpful than we can, because
And if you know anyone, you can direct me.
You said you're not in Kingston?
I'm in Ulster County.
All right, I would encourage you to reach out to the housing folks at Ulster County. And Bartek might know, or Steve might also know. Any other questions?
What is the address of your rental property in the city of Kingston?
It's not in Kingston.
Okay.
It's in Roseman. Would you like that?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Megan Bianco.
Good afternoon. My name is Megan Bianco. I'm the Director of Community Engagement for Ulster Strong. Thank you, Red Guidelines Board, for having this public hearing today. We believe that the effects of overregulation of the rental market, specifically mandating rent control, will continue to exacerbate the housing crisis here in Kingston to the detriment of both tenants and landlords. There is no denying that we are currently in a crisis in the city of Kingston regarding housing and pricing. However, we believe the solution is not found in regulatory approach. Rather, we believe the solution is to clear the way for new housing to be built here in Kingston. Having an increased supply of available housing by supporting projects to build new units across all income levels will alleviate the demands on present-day housing stock. However, because of the effects of outside forces, like for the money, having in our local community, creating national headlines and pitting locals against locals, Kingston is being exploited by people with national interests, playing out their national political agenda in our small community. This regulatory approach, combined with outside interests entrenching themselves in a local community to make headlines and impose their agendas has already served as a detriment for investment in the city of Kingston to build new housing. We've all heard anecdotal stories of investors preparing to build new housing, now shelving these projects or leaving town altogether. Further, the challenges that artificial limitations have on landlords will result in worse, if not unsafe, housing conditions for renters. If there is less income to maintain these properties, heightened by the challenges of the supply chain and inflation, it will manifest in lack of basic improvements for tenants. We see countless examples of this in New York City, both due to rent regulation in the private sector and also housing authority. Soon, if rent regulation is to take effect, there will be fewer property owners able to maintain their buildings. This disinvestment will lead to expansion of the city's housing authority because no one else will be able to maintain them. An artificial manipulation of the rental market is a dangerous game. What we all want is more and better quality housing for our locals. Do not enforce rent regulations that make it unlivable for our whole community, tenants and landlords alike. Lastly, no one here is anti-tenant. Those espousing anti-tenant rhetoric linking this notion to being anti-human rights is just untrue. Property owners and landlords, especially here in Kingston, are humans too. They have families and challenges and illness and stress. They care a great deal about our community, so much so that they have made the choice to keep their businesses here. The circus is not allowing for a meaningful and thoughtful approach to solve the problem. It's pure silliness that we're being exploited by the people with national interests to come in and push their agenda on us of continued high prices, less investment in our community, and worse, leaving us polarized and ununited. The indignation being created by for the many has no place in our community and is fodder for those playing dangerous games.
Thank you.
Questions?
I just want to make a couple of points of clarification. Rent control is not something that is in effect here in Kingston. This is a board that administers the state laws regarding rent stabilization. So I wanted to make sure that we get that right and that we are accurate in how we describe things. I also wanted to name really clearly that this board's purview is really limited to the statutory responsibility to adjust, to set a guideline for the adjustment of rents in the regulated apartments. The regulated apartments that this board has any authority to do anything on are built before 1974, and so new construction in Kingston does not fall under the purview of this board. And so I appreciate your coming here to, and I appreciate your concerns. And honestly, I wish I could do anything, and I wish this board could do anything about the urgent needs that you're speaking to. So, but I wanted to be clear about like where this board's purview is. Other questions?
Yeah, this is just for the stenographer. I'll try and speak clearly. Does Ulster Strong represent ETPA property owners?
No, we're a membership-based organization. We don't represent anyone.
Okay. Do you think?
Oh, sorry.
No, go
Are
ahead.
your members or some of your members ETPA property owners?
I would have to check back on that.
So you don't know your membership completely? They could have national interests. They could be shadowy.
You don't answer that question. We're gonna just let that question be, and we're not gonna engage with that question. Thank you. Other questions?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what Ulster Strong is.
Sure. We are a hyper local economic development engine focused on sustainable growth here in Ulster County specifically.
I don't understand what you said.
If you have a brochure that you could send
Or
to
you
the
are-
board's email, that would be
Me
great.
too.
I just want to understand who you are and what Ulster Strong is, and I didn't understand your sentence.
I'm sorry that you don't understand my sentence. I feel that this is quite harassment and targeted.
I beg your pardon. I really don't want to harass you. I really, because I thought you spoke very well and I was very interested in what you're saying. And I apologize if I feel like I'm harassing you and I'm really not. I really just want to understand.
Sure. If I could explain a bit more, we are solely focused in Ulster County, focused on building a community of sustainable development and growth. If that affects our tourism industry, our hospitality partners, our housing situation crisis that we find ourselves here today in, that is all under our purview. We work together.
Are you entrepreneurs, business owners?
Anyone is welcome to join Ulster Strong who's interested in joining.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. And you consider yourself a political organization?
We do not.
Uh-huh. Okay, so how do you influence what you wish to accomplish?
Well, right before you, I'm here speaking to you.
Right.
So that's one method.
Mhm.
Another method is through outreach, through the community programs that we're connected to, and through different meetings that we hold.
And how are you funded?
We're a dues-based membership
I see.
organization.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And I really apologize. I really did not mean to sound harassing.
I appreciate that.
I do have for,
Oh, I was just saying, just maybe if to help clarify, you could send as public comment to the email address, both your speech and some information explaining the organization. It might help the other.
so if it were up to Ulster Strong to set the rental adjustments for this year for 1 and 2 year leases, what is the position of your organization?
That's not our purview. I believe that when I first started here, that's the whole point of your report. So I would defer to the experts in that category.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Michael McKee.
Good afternoon, and first of all, I want to comment that the acoustics in this room are certainly better than City Hall, but I would urge board members to please speak up because some of us have some hearing loss. I was in the back room and I couldn't hear anything, so I moved up. And remember, some of us are older. My name is Michael McKee. I'm speaking on behalf of Tenants Political Action Committee. I want to first commend this board for the seriousness that you have shown in the last several months about your task. I'm used to dealing with the suburban boards, the 3 suburban boards, Nassau, Westchester, and Rockland. In fact, I testified Thursday night at the Nassau County Rent Guidelines Board. They're much more jaded. They've been doing this for like years and years and years, and you guys have been really refreshing because you've started from ground zero and you've learned a lot, and I really do appreciate how serious you've been. I'm here to urge you to freeze rents for the guidelines year beginning October 1st, 2023. For reasons that I will explain, I don't think you have any choice because of the litigation and because of the lack of data that you don't have from the state housing agency. I would normally submit a written statement for a hearing like this, but because there's no actual data, I decided I would just do some bullet points. By now, you must have come to understand that this is an extraordinarily weak system of rent regulation.
Yes.
Whether you call it rent control or rent stabilization or whatever, and it is, by the way, rent control. And academics have described New York's rent stabilization system as the weakest form of rent control in the United States, which it is. You also have come to understand, I'm sure, that we're dealing with essentially a toothless agency, one that has limited power, and we need statutory reform, which we're going to be working on next year, to give ORA the Office of Rent Administration, more enforcement powers. But you also have to realize, and I'm sure you've seen this, they are essentially reluctant to use the enforcement tools that they have. This is a system where nothing happens unless a tenant files a complaint. Landlords can get away with all sorts of egregious illegal conduct under the Emergency Tenant Protection Act unless a tenant chooses to file a complaint. And I was appalled and disappointed to hear Monday night when I was watching over Zoom that only 50 tenants in Kingston have filed fair market rent appeals. Because in working with For the Many and Citizen Action last year, we were trying very hard to persuade tenants to file fair market rent appeals, which is a one-time opportunity to challenge the initial rent. We were not prepared for this. We were not prepared for the implementation of ETPA in Kingston. I feel personally responsible for that. When I say we, I include the tenant movement, statewide tenant movement, as well as the local organizations, because once the city opted in, it was chaos. You saw this, many of you saw this. It was the Wild West. Landlords got away with egregious illegal activity. The State Division of Housing did nothing. People were being given conflicting advice. The attorney from DHCR was telling tenants to sign an illegal sign an illegal lease, pay an illegal rent increase, and then file an overcharge complaint, not mentioning that it takes the agency 2 to 3 years to even get to the point where they look at the complaint, and when they do, they usually will tell you they've lost the papers. 10 months down the road, we're in a situation where half the buildings in Kingston have not completed the initial apartment registration. 6 landlords returned income and expense schedules. DHCR told you themselves they can't compel landlords to comply with this, and you don't really have any data before you that would help you make a decision that would be informed. And then you were told, if you don't think we're doing a good enough job, you can do your own research. About the lawsuit, I believe we are going to win this lawsuit eventually. No doubt it's going to take months and months and months. If it then goes to the Court of Appeals, it might take longer. In my view, we are going to win this lawsuit. I think the landlord's case is very weak. I think the judge clearly did not read Mr. Gibley-Ogman's affidavit and or did not read Marcy Kovac's brief, Legal Services of Hudson Valley. At that point, every tenant in Kingston is going to be entitled to a 15% rent reduction. I'm almost finished. Going to be entitled to a 15% rent reduction. And if you were to impose a rent increase beginning this October, that would make the calculation of that 15% rent reduction much more difficult down the road.
Thank you, Michael.
Do 0 and 0. And I don't think you have any choice. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Are there questions for Michael?
Yes, Mr. McKee, thank you for your testimony. How many years have you been a tenant advocate?
53.
Regularly giving public comment to rent guidelines boards across New York State?
I have testified before the New York City Rent Guidelines Board probably 35, 40 times. I've testified at the Westchester, Nassau, and Rockland County Board. Well, Rockland I've done like 3 or 4. It's a very small universe. It's hard to get to Spring Valley, but during Zoom, it was I was able to testify at Rockland. But I've testified at Nassau County every year since at least 1995.
Thank you. Certainly seems like you're an expert.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No, thank you, Michael. Don Tollerman, and while Don talks, could you get sign-up sheets? Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I'm Don Tollerman. I'm a resident of Kingston, and I own rental properties here in Kingston, none of which they're smaller than 6 units, so they don't pertain to rent to the control board. However, I would like to recommend a 5% increase in rents as a minimum for your consideration. I want to put it in human terms. So I have, in one of my buildings, I have some old kitchens. Maybe they haven't been renovated in 20 years. So if we get a 5%, even a 5% increase, in a $1,200 apartment, that's $50 extra a month that the tenant is paying. But at least with that $500 or $600 a year, I can make an investment in upgrading the kitchen. And over maybe 5 or 6 years, I'll see some of that kitchen paid for. That's why I need to have some kind of increase in my rent, because my tenants don't want to live in an old kitchen. They want a nice kitchen. They don't want a discounted apartment. They want a nice apartment. And so I'd like to make the point that if tenants need help, and many do, it's the government's role to help them. And state vouchers or assistance from the city, like the mayor was suggesting, that's the way to do it. The burden should not fall on the owners. Right, because we need to have, we're made a big investment, we took a big risk, and we want to provide a nice home for people to live. And so if I can't raise rents to pay for the new kitchen, I'm gonna sell my building because there's no point. There's no point in doing it. And oh, by the way, when I have an empty apartment and I get 100 applications, now because of I can't evict somebody because it's with they can stay even when their lease is up. I'm very nervous about who I rent to, so I'm going to be super selective about who rents the apartment. And my apartments are below market, but I've always tried to rent it to people who, teachers, bus drivers, musicians, artists. And now it's getting risky for me to do that. So I'm being, super selective, and that's not fair. I want to be more open to diversity of income ranges and occupations, and I just can't. So that's why I believe that it's really just it's a need that as inflation goes up, we need to charge some more rent so people can live in a nice place. And if that's not affordable, it's the government's role to provide vouchers so people can afford it. Questions?
Thank you, Don. I just have one thing that I want to make sure gets clear, which is that the ETPA, and you have no reason to know this because your buildings aren't covered by the ETPA, but the ETPA provides for landlords to file for major capital improvements and individual apartment improvements that allow landlords to work with the Division of Housing and Community Renewal to raise rents in a way that matches the improvements that landlords do to apartment buildings, to units. And so those tools do exist within the provisions of the ETPA.
Okay, so while that is true, it goes eventually to a judge to allow or disallow the MCI. And there's really, these people are not qualified to know the cost of a kitchen or a new chimney or a new furnace. And so that part of it, while it does exist, it's flawed in how it's executed. And it's also many months to work its way through the system, and it's uncertain about the outcome. And so, yes, it's true, but it's not a good system.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thanks
I appreciate it.
everybody.
Rich is already justified. Megan's justified. Teresa Green.
So.
Here we go. Thank you guys for coming together to help us renters find the right solution. I'm Teresa Green. I am on the organizing committee of the 305 Hurley Avenue Tenants Union. And I'm going to kind of go in between my notes here. I'm usually a letter writer, so let's go back and forth. First, I want to applaud the mayor for what he mentioned today here about the new incentive for the smaller landlords. I think that that incentive that you could apply and get $60,000 to renovate an apartment is a great incentive and sort of takes the sting out of what I've been sitting here hearing from the smaller landlords about their issues with renovating and upgrading. So I'm happy to hear that that is the solution and that $1 million has been set aside for that. And I would recommend that any landlord here who's heard that needs to get with the mayor to find out right away how to get their applications in. Okay. We knew at Stony Run that what we were fighting for would set a precedence around the city for other larger complexes that were under ETPA protection. So, I'm happy to hear that there's been a lot of organizing. I believe that the right regulatory agreement terms will be a way to help the other ETPA properties move forward with the new changes. The rent appeals, I wanted to speak, the rent appeals were chaotic. And so I heard Michael Key speak about that and And I was also trying to help people to get those FMRA forms in. We had a lot of problems getting records and information from our landlords. It changed so many times and people just became disenchanted with the whole process and decided to forego the efforts. And, you know, we live in a large complex in which it was the birthplace for rent gouging. All right. So getting to that, I wanted to say that, you know, I've been here to testify before. And given the fact that the rent reduction, which the board found fair, is delayed in court, we're just urging this board to give a 0% increase for the next year. There, you know, still a profit margin of almost 50%, despite the rising cost of everything. So we cannot continue to pay high percentages on our income for rent. We need this board to vote for a 0 increase. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
Let me clarify, please.
As you're representing the tenant union.
Can you speak up?
Oh.
Yeah,
So
towards the back.
we've been told by DHCR that no one has filed a service complaint yet throughout any of the EPA properties. And last time we had public hearings, we heard a lot of people from Stony Run complaining about service issues. Do you have any?
So we have a lot of service issues and they have been people who have filed.
DHCR as of Monday has not received any.
Okay, well, you know, we've worked with workshops for the many, and they have a list of those people who have done such. So that kind of threw me to the ear that they're saying that there was no filing of those complaints. There are a lot of issues still remaining, I have to say, through the provisions that we asked to be added into the regulatory agreement around our resolution to change Stony Run from fair market rent to workforce affordable housing. That has panned out very well for us, and we've been happy with what the terms we've come to the terms of. So we are meeting with the landlord on a monthly basis. We were before the regulatory agreement was signed, but we are, the organizing committee is meeting with the landlord and management on a monthly basis, and we're trading off what's going on. Now, we keep coming back to the table with old business because there's a lot of things that are just not being done still, despite the fact that we're sitting at the table. Well, you know, we're like you guys, we're gonna keep plugging and keep working and keep pushing until we see a change. But I would say that we were pleased with the provisions that were put into the regulatory. We just still have to stay plugging. And so is it still, are the tenants still able to do those complaints for some of the maintenance that's not going on? Because they're ready to escalate at this point, since doing it civilly at the table is really a push and pull.
I would say, Teresa, just as I think that landlords should file major capital improvement and individual apartment improvement filings when they are planning renovations, so too should tenants file complaints for services that are being inadequately provided or not provided in the terms of the lease. As Michael McKee said, the key enforcement mechanism of ETPA is landlords and tenants filing their paperwork with the Division of Homes and Community Renewal in order to start those processes. So,
well, we will continue to push that issue. Thank you guys so much. There's so much. We do have Carolyn Soto, who sits on the board with me, and she has spoken to the tenants at our last meeting about the importance of escalating.
Are you saying that the DHCR told us that there have been no service complaints? Are you saying that they are incorrect? That there have been service?
Absolutely.
So they are wrong. There have been service complaints submitted to DHCR.
Correct.
Thank you. That's what I want to know. And do you have any proof of that?
June,
Over here.
you, there we go.
Okay.
June.
I'd encourage you to send an email to this board's email address as well. Great. Thank you, Teresa. Bill Erner.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am a former Kingston city tenant, now homeowner adjacent. Partner owns the home that I live in. I am a member of the Ulster County Legislature elected from District 6 here in the city of Kingston.
That's mine.
So I see many constituents here, some of whom are property owners, some of whom are tenants. I have time, I want to respond to some of what's been said so far, but I'll begin with my prepared remarks. Last year, you made decisions about rent adjustments, look back periods, and leases. So now consider if the emergency conditions have improved. If they have not, or if you don't know, then you should make the same decisions this year. Michael McKee's observing the weakness of New York State rent control notwithstanding, one building in my district that came under ETPA regulation has a particularly egregious situation. That's 58 Fair Street.
That building,
Oh,
that building changed ownership in March 2022. Right away, the new owner began attempting to collect rents allegedly owed for several months under the previous owner. The landlord also allegedly refused certain payments for some tenants. Then within the month that ETPA placed the building under rent regulation, the landlord sued to evict most of the tenants. Apparently, the court wouldn't accept a good cause eviction defense, which the city had in place at the time, and some of the tenants could not even obtain legal counsel. In the end, at least 4 of the households that I'm personally aware of were forced out, scattered all over this city, county, and beyond. They were all poor and working class, Black and brown households, most of whom had grown up if not lived in Kingston for generations. Now, how could anyone, the landlord, the tenants, or even the Kingston Housing Court have known how much rent was owed when the Rent Guidelines Board had not yet set the look-back period, the rent adjustments, or the terms for fair market rent appeals? Shame on DHCR for permitting this to happen. It makes a sham of the supposed protections tenants should have during this housing emergency. What will you do to make things right for these displaced tenants as well as others threatened with the same fate? We could avoid this whole scenario, and someday soon we must. Our city cannot abide half owning land and property and the other half at their mercy. I'd like to address, how much time do I have left?
20 seconds.
I'll just go on the heels of what the mayor said, and there are programs for property owners that the county has put in place. The landlord ambassador program we put in the county budget. I encourage any property owners to look into that. There's the ADU +1 program that the city and county are partnering on, and the home energy retrofits program as well, which is also a jobs program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any questions?
In speaking to your constituents, is the cost of housing one of their primary concerns? Would you say you hear that more often than other complaints? That is the number one concern of my constituents, property owners and tenants alike.
Did you hear that one?
Any other questions? Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it. Lisa Lerner.
Hello, I'll try to project. Thank you for having me and letting me speak. My name is Lisa Lerner. I am in one of the buildings supported by this board in 91 Main Street. I am a teacher and I rent a 2-bedroom apartment with my young adult daughter. We moved in March of 2021 and the rent was $1,700. And the building has not been registered with the DHCR. So I did a little Googling and found out that the previous tenant in 2020 was paying $1,200, which was a 40% increase. There was, if you're going to ask any questions about what sort of major capital improvements were made, they were very little. They had to paint. There were broken things and it wasn't major. The rent went up 5% in 2022 to $1,785. And now I'm currently paying 38.6% of my total income for 2022. And I looked up the government guidelines says over 30% would be a hardship. And it's an old building. We are currently dealing with leaks and mold and a fire exit that doesn't open, assorted other things. I've got a daughter in college. I'm trying to fund the time when I can no longer work, if that should ever happen. And I'm kind of at my limit. I really do support a 0% increase. Moving is costly, it's time consuming. I work, long hours and I don't really have the time for that or want to do it. I'm part of this community. And I'd like to say, thank you so much for listening and for all your protection.
Have you filed a services complaint with the HCR about leaks, mold, and the fire exit that doesn't open?
I have not. I do speak with my landlord and he is responsive to a point. I know he owns several buildings. I helped him find a new super for our building who works part-time. We all do our best to kind of make things happen and get repaired, but the leaks have been going on for weeks now. And he says, where's the roofer and that sort of thing. So it's not happening super fast, but he's not unresponsive.
Other questions?
Are any utilities included in your rent?
Yes, heat is included and hot water. I pay my own cooking gas and electric.
And you had mentioned there was a rent increase last year. Was that after the 1st of August?
No, it was not. It was March of 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Lerner. You say that you pay 39% of your income in rent. If we increase and that you are a member of our community and an educator, what would it mean if we increase the rent?
That would cause a lot of stress. I mean, I do pay college tuition. I have a 17-year-old car that needs thousands of dollars every year somehow now. Groceries have gone up a lot. I joined a local farm CSA to try to lower those costs. I mean, I don't know actually how long I can keep going. I honestly don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jessica Myers.
Hello, my name is Jessica Myers. I am a tenant and I live at 305 Hurley Avenue in a 2-bedroom apartment with my partner and a roommate. We moved to Kingston, New York in September of last year after I was offered a position that required me to be in person in office. Previously, my partner and I had been living in Brooklyn in a 3-bedroom apartment by ourselves. When we started to look for a place to move to here, we realized that our pay would be adjusted to match the cost of living for the area. And in that adjustment, we would not be able to afford housing with just the 2 of us in the time frame we were looking to move in. So we asked a friend if he would move in with us. I want to pause and let something sink in. My partner and I are privileged white millennials in our 30s with master's degrees, blessed to have low student loan debt, and we realized that we needed to ask a friend to move in with us to help cover the cost of rent because we would be paying $2 more per square foot than we were paying in Brooklyn while getting paid less. I am aware that the cost of everything is going up. Trust me, I have tried to buy eggs recently. But if a landlord charges so much for housing that their tenants do not have any disposable income to spend in their community, or worse, they can't afford groceries, then the landlords directly contribute to the overall disintegration of the community. I am unable to fully enjoy the bounty and beauty of Kingston because my rent is too high. My request to keep rents frozen is not out of a hatred or misunderstanding of what it takes to be a landlord. My father is a landlord in Houston, Texas, and I know intimately how much it costs to maintain safe and healthy housing. My request comes from the fact that in many cases, the rent being charged in this area is already higher than what the federal government states is the fair market rate for the area. And to protect those tenants and our community, we must keep the rents frozen. My last remark is, according to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the fair market rate for 2023 in Ulster County for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,498. I currently pay $2,200 and no utilities are included. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heat and air conditioning are not included.
So, and when did you move in?
September of last year. Yeah, it was awful timing.
So you pay Central Hudson directly for your utilities?
I do, yes. I pay them directly for my electricity. The water at Stony Run, there's a weird equation that is done. It's split, but the whole building is split, and then we pay that.
It's not weird, it's legal.
Good to know. My heat is electric.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amanda Treasure.
Hi, thank you guys for letting us speak here today. I'm also a member of the tenants union at Stony Run. That's where I lived, and I've been there for 17 years. And with that being said, that's what they tell you when you move into Stony Run, that you have heat and hot water included at the time that we moved in 17 years ago, which is not true, because your furnace runs on electricity and you have to pay the electricity. So therefore you're paying for all that. So in reality, there is nothing included at Stony Run. I would like to see a no increase due to the fact that a 5% increase when I recently at my job got a 2% increase in pay, which is nothing compared to a 5% increase in rent, because then it's going to get to the point where eventually I'm not even going to be able to stay living at Stony Run if this keeps going like that. I'm not going to be able to afford it because I have my husband who's on disability, and with Social Security, they pay next to nothing close to what he would make when he was working and was able to. And the other night he went out to go shopping, inflation is just through the roof. At Walmart, which is usually a place that you can find decent prices on stuff usually, but he was paying $10 for a pound of cheese. That is ridiculous. And with increases in rent, increases in food, increases in gas, increases in electricity, how are we supposed to live with not having? And I work for the state of New York, which is, yes, a decent job, but not making even with what the regulatory agreement is talking about, if we went to that, if we didn't have the EPTA, to where you would have to pay an 80% AMI, which would be you making $76,000 a year. I don't make that. So if that's the case, it's just I don't want to be pushed out of Kingston. I've lived here my whole life. I'm 53 years old. This is where I grew up. This is where I would like to stay. This is where I would like to retire. But with the way things are going, it's like you're being pushed out of here and you have to go elsewhere. And it's not fair to us who've lived here and want this to be our community and want our children to be raised here. It's something just got to give with the whole situation. And I really hope that you guys look towards not raising any of the rent and keeping it at 0 for an increase. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Amanda.
What size unit do you live in?
A 3-bedroom.
3-bedroom, and do you mind sharing what you pay for rent?
My rent is $13.65. But with that, it's like the other tenants that live there say, we have to fight with the landlord. We're now working with them, but my thing is, words to me don't mean nothing. When you say you're gonna do something, I wanna see it happening. And so far, everything that's being promised is not happening.
You filed a service complaint?
I have, and we spoke directly to the owners about the whole situation.
I'm sorry, did you file a service complaint with Department of Homes and Community Renewal, New York State?
She filed a rental return.
Okay. If you have a service problem, you can file a service complaint with DHCR.
Okay, because like the one was saying we have an issue with mold. And I even have documentation from a lab saying that the mold that came in is black mold that is there for somebody who's asthmatic or somebody who has respiratory issues. I have asthma, my 17-year-old son has asthma. So that's a problem. Just like I keep being told, we're gonna give you new vent covers that are full of mold. I keep being told this over and over and over again and nothing. Even though I'm talking to them saying, hey, this is what's going on. What's gonna be done about it? Oh, you know, false promises and nothing gets done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry, one more.
Thank you, Ms. Treasurer. You actually brought up that mold issue last year.
Mhm.
It has not been addressed in the.
No.
Brenda Miller.
My name is Brenda Miller and I live at Kingston. I live at Kingston Waterfront. I've been living in Kingston for 4 years. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. A year ago, in December of 2022, my lease came up and my landlord tried to raise my rent by 21.5%. I, refused to sign the lease. And told them that, about the good cause eviction. And they said, well, you're not covered. And I felt that I was covered by the increase, not necessarily by the reduction in it. And pressed it. And so for the first 3 months of the year, I just sent them the old rent and a 5% increase. After 3 months, they didn't cash my checks. And then after 3 months, they notified me by letter that they were going to raise my rent 4.99%. Why they did that, I don't know. And then I signed the lease. But I'm going to get a new lease in December. And so I'm going to go through the same thing. And I feel that, Kingston is not Brooklyn or Manhattan. It's a small town. And I think that the reason that all these people left is they couldn't find any place to live. That might be a good reason. And so what I'm hoping is that we will, put into effect a 0% increase until we figure out what, exactly what, is going on with the economy and inflation, but also whether landlords are telling the truth about what their expenses are. I mean, I pay completely for my heat, my electricity, air conditioning, plus not only what is inside my apartment, but I pay for external electricity as well. I also pay for water and sewer and trash collection. So really, I'm essentially getting this shell of this space. They do come to repair things. So for most of the time, particularly if it's a leak, anything regarding a leak, they would come. But it can take a while, and they sort of do it with spit and glue. I mean, they're not doing a major thing unless when my refrigerator went bad. They did give me a new refrigerator, but they did do that. But I still don't think it's worth what they did is really the amount of money that I've been paying in increases, because I've had, fairly large increases. Until they bought 21.5%. And I think what happens is that you will pay as much as you can, but it's hard to bring, to spend the time and find out where, and what we need to pay for increases. And then also.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. But stay up in case there are questions. Michael.
What percentage of your income do you pay on?
Probably about 128%, but
And are you on a fixed income?
relatively, not all the time, but.
Thank you.
Other questions?
The property you live in, is it covered by ETPA rent stabilization?
I don't think so. Our building was built in 1983.
Oh, then it would not be.
Yeah.
As an aside, do you mind sharing what you pay for rent?
$1,432, but that's, is only for the apartment. It's not, no heat, or sewer.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Andrew Hiller.
Hey, my name is Andrew Hiller. I'm a homeowner in Rosendale, and I'm here with For the Many and BSA. I went to Bard in the 90s and fell in love with Kingston then. And after graduating, like a lot of folks, I moved down to Brooklyn to find work and was lucky enough to be a rent stabilized tenant there for 23 years. And I'm sure folks are aware of how extreme rent inflation was in the city during those years. My stabilized lease protected me from the worst of it. Though even my rent increases far outpaced the rate of inflation and doubled during the time I was there, thanks to anti-tenant mayors like Bloomberg. During those years, I watched as wave after wave of diverse working class tenants were displaced. Those without rent regulated homes were swept away almost immediately. Those lucky enough to be regulated endured years of harassment and illegal evictions while the city stood by and watched. It's been really bittersweet returning to Kingston. I feel extremely lucky to be here. But with the obscene rent hikes and aggressive evictions, it's just really apparent that the process of speculation and displacement I witnessed in Brooklyn is in full swing here. Despite lots of work with groups fighting displacement in Brooklyn, I've seen that once a working class community is displaced, you can't just put it back together again. If you don't act decisively to make sure rents remain affordable for working class people, you're going to see the same displacement that I saw. The 15% rent rollback voted on by this board for last year was a really strong step in the right direction, and it's extremely frustrating to see that progress blocked by speculators, many of whom don't have a connection to this area. Until the rent reduction is restored, the RGB must keep rents frozen for both 1 and 2 year leases. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thank you. June Neiman. Sorry, and June, are you representing For the Many?
No.
Okay, great. All right, so 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, hello, my name is June Neiman, as you all know. I'm the organizing strategist at For the Many and have been working closely with tenants over the last year or so to organize their buildings and to organize tenants to show up to these very hearings. I firstly just want to address some of the comments made earlier here tonight or this afternoon. We are a Hudson Valley based organization, right? We've been working in this area for over 10 years. We have offices here in Kingston, Poughkeepsie, Newburgh, and Middletown. We have been part of countless fights for working people in this area. Yeah, I think it was quite interesting that we had sort of a front group of landlords accuse us of not being local. I can only assume it's because there was no member of the public who came out and supported them last public hearing, and so they wish to generate the appearance of community support. Moving on to the conversation of inflation. Inflation is real, but who is actually being impacted most by inflation, right? Landlords who have lots of properties and a lot of money, or tenants who are barely able to make it, day to day, right? So tenants that we are working with are dealing with not only increased rents, but also increased utility costs, increased gas, increased food, etc. And many people are being priced out of their homes here in the city of Kingston. Additionally, the rent increase that we have seen over the last 5 years, the rent has doubled over the last 5 years. That started before this current period of inflation even began. So I think that argument is pretty much no. But I do want to talk just briefly about a few things we've seen in the last few months. Obviously, we had an FMRA clinic. We tried to help a lot of people fill out FMRAs and rent overcharges. I don't have specific numbers for you. It was definitely less who filed the specific issue complaints, but we will be following up with tenants and asking them to do so. And the process of landlords not registering has made that quite challenging, right? We know that in Chestnut Mansion, a large percentage of their tenants are pushed out by rent increases after the rent freeze. And now a lot of the new tenants are facing increasingly high rents. At Stony Run, the only reason we were able to get tenants to stop being illegally overcharged is because the tenant union negotiated a solution to landlords. And then I have heard countless and countless stories of tenants falling, about $100 to $200 behind their rent, immediately served with an eviction notice for thousands of dollars that they had already paid. And the lawyers of these landlords are openly admit to them that this is right. And even under good cause, landlords were not, following the law. So we have seen time and time again that the landlords in the city, many of whom who are owning the buildings, are simply not following the law, which is why we need to keep tenants in their homes. And this board and the decision that you all made last year is the thing that is keeping tenants in their homes. So thank you so much for your courage and bravery. And I just ask you all to maintain the rent freeze and pass a 0% rent adjustment. Thank you.
We paid our rent 3 days late this month and got a thing saying that they were proceeding for eviction.
Right. So yeah, we are seeing this across the city. As soon as there's any opportunity to evict, landlords have been moving as quickly as possible to evict rent stabilized tenants, and then they're illegally increasing the rent and trying to rent it out to tenants who don't know better, often from the city, and so they're used to paying higher rents. So these are low for them, but extremely high for Kingston. And this is happening in rent stabilized buildings as well as not rent stabilized buildings across the city of Kingston and the whole region rather.
Did you also think that it was possible to file overcharges with the state at this particular time, or that it was necessary to wait until after?
We have filed a lot of rent overcharge complaints, but no one has gotten any response from DHCR. My understanding is that is because they're waiting for this legal case to play out. It's concerning because the rent overcharges are still valid no matter whether or not the rent is reduced, right? There should have been a rent freeze from August till now, regardless of anything else happening. So any of these rent overcharges should be taken seriously by DHCR now and not until after this court case is resolved, because we don't even know how long that will take. And there are tenants in this room who are still facing illegally high rents. Yeah.
Well, I entirely agree with you that state is failing in that regard of dealing with changes in rents after August 1st. And I think we as a board voiced our concern to DHCR, although they probably will do nothing about it. You had mentioned that throughout the city, you, I assume as a member of the board, many saw illegal or applications of rent and people and different buildings charging, changing the rent for whatever reason. Is there any way that you could document any of that stuff and send that as comment? Because one of the things that I think we see here, we haven't been able to get this from DHCR. We haven't really been able to get any of this in public. We hear these stories, right? But without any information, they can't really mean much of anything to us.
I totally understand. I mean, it's something that we're doing our best to work on. The reality is, tenants, if they're out of the area, are scared, right? They don't know what rights they have and what power they have. And so in order to sort of do what you are asking for, we need to form tenant unions, associations, and that does take time, right? So we can't, there's 64 buildings that are covered by ETPA. We have one higher tenant organizer and myself doing a lot of the tenant organizing and working with all these tenants. So yeah, I mean, we're doing our best to try to uncover these stories, and we'll certainly be asking folks to be submitting more stuff to the state. Thanks to the board. Any other questions?
Thank you, June.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Soto. Ray Soto.
Good afternoon, everyone. I've before, and I'm going to testify again that I support the zero rent increase for the following reasons. First of all, I'm a tenant of Stony Run, and we've seen the increases in rent and the threats that they've applied to many of the tenants there. Last rent increase that they wanted us to pay for was a 30% increase, and we said no. The good thing is that ETPA came into force and we were able to force rents. So that was something for the people. In light of the court situation that's in the present moment, many of the filings that we've done with the DHCR, including the actual base rent that we pay, because when we received the form, they had increased the garbage in the base rent. So we never heard back to say there's been an adjustment in this particular form that your base rent is really should be this number and not the base plus utilities or additional amenities, right? So this is sort of a scheme that the landlords are saying, hey, this is where we want to establish a base rent, and then from this point forward, we're going to increase it. So I think in order for us to reach the point of increasing a rent is to get the base rent first. And this is why I feel that right now, with all the uncertainty that's going on, a zero increases for the next year, and the RGB board needs to vote into that, should be enforced until all of this settles, and then we can sort of move forward, because we do want the landlords to make their income. We want to pay the increases as long as the services are being provided and so forth. I personally have filed many maintenance reports through the Stony Run website. The only thing is we haven't really filed them to the DHCR because they told us to hold off on that, and we've done the FMRA and for the rent reduction that many of us have done. So I'm included in that list. So in summary, I mean, there's been so many rising costs around the community and around our environments as tenants, right? Inflation, traveling, people with children, how do they deal with, with that? Some parents have to not only have both of them working to pay their rent, but many of them even have their kids working so that they can, make the difference in the rents and things like that. So I came to Kingston thinking that in a couple of years I would be retiring from New York City. I lived in the rent stable for 2 years. So that's the reason why I came here. And then all of a sudden I found that the rent was very close to the 30% threshold that I thought that I would be paying. And if it goes any higher, it would obviously go over that. So
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. Any questions?
Are you aware that we're deciding for 2 years, not just this year?
Okay, so for the 2 years, 1 to 2 year, zero rent increase, I propose.
You had mentioned that you were told not to file service complaints with DHCR.
Initially,
not to do that.
That was one of the initial, like those overcharge forms and stuff. They said first do the rent agreement and the rent reduction history and stuff, and then hold off on filing any maintenance issues. And,
do you know who told you?
I don't know, but that's one of the reasons why I held off on that. But I did file it with with Stony Run. So I thought maybe there was some resolution. So I think the idea was if Stony Run acted in good faith and started fixing these things, then we wouldn't have to report it to the city.
I think they have, if I remember correctly, a property owner has 30 days to remedy the issue, and then you should file with DHCR. I'm not sure about that. You can check on DHCR's website. But just remind everyone that this is a complaint-driven process, so the state can't react unless people complain. So if there's a legitimate issue, please.
Yeah, I think we need, and that's a good point, because one of the things that I've noticed that whenever I put it, I complain in the system, it gets closed like a month later. I don't know if it's an automated system. But they close it and then have to reopen. So yes, maybe doing it that way, then I know it'll be on the records.
Okay. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Junior. Teddy Archweiger. And Teddy, are you representing an organization or just here as yourself?
Yeah, I'm here representing the Mid-Hudson Valley Democratic Socialists in America. I'm Eddie. I'm a member of the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA. I grew up here in the Hudson Valley and I'm a resident and tenant in Uptown Kingston. Briefly, the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA is a member-led democratic political activist organization fighting for systemic changes that empower working people. And our chapter covers Ulster, Dutchess, and Orange counties in the area. So on behalf of the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, we appreciate the Kingston Rent Guidelines Board's decision last year to enact a 15% rent reduction for units regulated under the Emergency Tenant Protections Act. As a chapter, the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA has knocked on thousands of doors in the city of Kingston during the campaigns that successfully elected Sarahana Shrestha to New York State Assembly, Bill Lerner to Ulster County Legislator, and is working hard to get Charlotte Lloyd elected in Ward 1 to the City of Kingston Common Council. We heard from tenants in every neighborhood of Kingston about crushing rents, how many are forced to take on additional jobs or relocate out of Kingston or the region to afford accessible rents. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I've had countless conversations with friends and community members who are being kicked out of their homes due to exorbitant rent increases. One conversation comes to mind where I spoke with a woman a couple of weeks ago who'd been placed in emergency housing after she and her family were evicted from their home of many years, simply because her landlord decided it was more important for them to increase her rent by over $500 on a whim than it was to keep her housed. In weeks following their eviction, her husband died of a heart attack. She is convinced that the complete upheaval of their lives in the aftermath of their eviction likely played a role in her husband's death. You look around Kingston on a beautiful summer day like today, people are enjoying the city, the landscape, and the culture of this community. But if the people who work here, who create all this, cannot afford to live here and take part, and that's not a community, it's not a neighborhood, that's a theme park for the rich, and that's not what we will have happen here in Kingston. Working people are the foundation of Kingston. They're facing impossible choices to pay for electricity or pay rent, feed their families or pay rent. We must prioritize meeting the basic needs of all of Kingston's residents. The purpose of housing is to provide housing, not to generate even higher profits for a few landlords. It's beyond frustrating that Kingston landlords have blocked the 15% rent reduction for more than 6 months. We strongly support the rent reduction, and until it's restored, the Rent Guidelines Board must keep rents frozen for both 1 and 2 year leases, the 0% rent adjustment. Thank you for your time.
I'm struggling with your handwriting, but someone who works at Design Data.
It's Rebecca Holderness.
Awesome, thank you. It's just your initial.
I went to Vassar, so they didn't teach me how to write. Hi, how are you?
Thank you so much.
Pull the whole thing down. How's that? Great. I'm
Perfect.
Rebecca Holderness. I came to Kingston because my kid went to Bard and because I went to Vassar. I moved 900 miles to get here, and I've had 2 leases now. Between my first lease and my second lease, so I came here at market rate. My 2-bedroom apartment was 1,900, maybe, or 17 something. My next lease was 14.5%. I didn't really know what to do about that. And I was bringing a new business here called 2 Foot Design Data, where I think about housing all day, all the time, 7 days a week. And I'm on the Kingston Housing Task Force, which makes it really uncomfortable for me to be up here. But at the time of my 14.5% increase, I called Bartek. Bartek sort of went, I don't know. And God bless Bartek. We're not covered by the, we're the sister house to Stony Run. And there was also at the time that 14.5% increase of my rent, there was the do it in 30 days, or it goes up some more, or it goes up some more. We do pay for water and garbage. And also I had to appeal to the state to try to get a shared meter, which I still don't have apparently, which means all sorts of odd costs keep arriving, right? So I don't even know what those costs are. I didn't feel that I could really fight the rent because I have a business and I didn't want to go into eviction because I thought that would make it impossible for me to borrow money from my business. When I've decided that that wasn't going to work, I actually started paying 5.5%, which I've done for the last 4 months. And last week, I'm trying to work with my landlord on my rent. They're nice enough, but I still came back to a notice on my door that said, we're going to take you to court. And I'm like, great, let's go. So I have a disability, I have a traumatic brain injury. I'm also a senior as of about 4 months ago.
Congratulations.
Remarkable. I would never admit that in public. Except that my rent is so high. So my point is that I'm a fan of missing middle housing. I think we need to find regulations that apply to everyone. And on top of it being impossible for me to pay anything, it's also terrifying. So I don't really know what to do, who to talk to. And I love my committee. I love the Kingston Housing Task Force. I think they're doing a great job. I'm a huge fan of the zoning. I have research to back that up. So if you want to know, come to me. So I'm doing my best for Kingston, and I'm just hoping that you will remember that there are many people that fall outside of this this 1979 multi-housing rule. Also, I'm seeing my neighbors being pushed out, many of the seniors. It's somebody they put stuff out in the parking lot. So yeah, so it's tough, and I want to work with my landlord. I just want to make clear before my time's up that I'm not against landlords, and I think that they should, I think we should be working together in this system with clarity and with recourse, right? And I don't think we have either.
Thank you so much for that.
That's the question.
Thank you so much. Charlotte Lloyd.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Lloyd. I've been at Stony Run since February 2021, but I'm a lifelong Kingston resident. I'm 25 years old. I looked for years to find somewhere to live, even with 2 incomes and a budget of $1,200 a month. We were lucky to catch Stony Run the day it changed hands and snagged a rate much lower than what they're advertising right now. It's almost impossible to find housing in Kingston. All of my friends either live with parents, leave town, or are in massive debt. Last year, my rent increased by 10%, and it got me wondering, is that going to be every year? I've spent many days and nights worrying about how long we have until we can no longer afford to stay. We can't afford college, travel, personal projects. All we do is work, pay rent, survive. And we have it better than most of our friends, even with those circumstances. They can't afford to be here. They're at work. They're trying to fix a car because they can't afford to see a mechanic. We're the ones that are better off. The well-being of tenants doesn't seem to matter to landlords based on their actions. Yesterday, the front door to my apartment was flooded, but I knew that my building wasn't the worst of it. I'm still waiting to see if they'll take care of the black mold in my air vents, and so is my neighbor. But all the vacant apartments look very nice. They were working on the newest empty apartment in my building yesterday. They just want as much money as they can get out of us, legal or not. The landlords aren't submitting proper documents, illegally raising rents, and simply not complying with the laws we already have. Thursday, I spoke with one of my neighbors, and they're still paying an illegal rent price. And it's been 6 months now. My best friend is being priced out of Kingston as we speak. She's leaving for Arizona soon. Because there's nowhere for her here, she can't find anything. And she's had a Section 8 voucher for years, but they couldn't find somewhere to live within the Section 8 parameters. And I imagine it was hard enough to get the Section 8 voucher as it is. Filling out paperwork, going to meetings, proving your income, proving how many people are in your household. And they still have to leave. And she's been here longer than I have, being born 5 months before me. We need that rent reduction, and we need to keep the rents frozen. There's been a lot of numbers being thrown around, so let me tell you what's really happening. My rent is 60% of my income with nothing included. And we still need to pay for groceries, gas money, any clothes. I had to buy clothes to come here. 57% of Kingston residents are rent burdened, paying 30% of their income towards rent. And that number is over 70% for people of color. 80% AMI is still difficult to achieve. The rent price at 80% AMI for a 1-bedroom is still $14.40 a month. And that's more than a mortgage. It's hard enough to keep a roof over our heads, whether it's moldy or not. We need the rent increase to be 0%. I hope that you protect tenants today, just as I'm trying to. I'll be running for Ward 1's next alderwoman, and I hope that we can protect tenants together.
All right, Charlotte. Junior.
Two things. You mind saying what size unit you live in?
Well, they changed it to be a 2-bedroom, even though it used to be a 1-bedroom with a den. It's a very, very, very small second.
Photo 1.5. You had mentioned issues with service complaints. Have you filed a lack of service complaint with the department?
I do believe we filled out the FMRA form, but it's been hard to find the time to fill out the other service complaints. We've been sending the landlord message after message, trying to get the black mold fixed, but the next step is to file those complaints, yes.
State. Yeah. Oh, and you said that heat not included in your? My understanding was all Stony.
Well, we do need to use the electricity to run the heat and air conditioning.
Natural gas is included.
Yes,
That's
but we
what-
can't use it because of black mold. So
I mean, I'm sure that there's a problem.
always.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gerald Schneider.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your service on the Rhode Island Board. Can't be easy, I'm sure. I'm here to absolutely support zero rent increases over the next 1 and 2 years. Here in Kingston, if we could roll them back, that would be even better. There are so many reasons why I support this. I myself have rented for over 25 years of my life. I was a beneficiary of rent stabilization in New York City. But even with rent stabilization, at a certain point, I had to leave town because no equity means just rent, and nothing at the end of it all. So I came up here 27 years ago, thank God I did. But now I am now a senior. I now have a house with property, with slope, with trees, with a well and a septic. Maintenance and care of that as a senior is going to become a problem. And even if I were to sell my house, even with the ridiculous increase in rents, and in property values, I would not have enough money to live long-term in any rental in New York State, especially here in Kingston, where I've been for 27 years. I have a spouse, they have a union job, but even on our incomes, we're under 75,000 total for the year. My social security is $1,400 a month. My income from self-employment is going down each year because a lot of different reasons. But when I hear landlords talk about markets and industries and their, revenues, it really gets me crazy because people have a right to have a place to live. Now, in case you're confused about who might be Ulster Strong, their board membership looks like it's a pay to play for your seat because you could be an organization, you could be a bank and be on their board. We have Rich Lanzarone, lots of people, Richard Travers, Steve Turk, Rocking Horse Ranch, Brad Jordan, Frank Palatine. We have Don Tallerman. I'm skipping some names, John Nacarado, but we also have the Ulster Regional Chamber of Commerce, Rich Alfondre, Clement Brooks and Savior team from Berkshire Hathaway, Don Gruner, Rondout Savings Bank, Ulster Savings Bank. John Mullen gets a lot of contracts for building here in the city. Stu Myers, wow, Raleigh Green, somebody who got on the roster whose grandfather isn't buried here. That's amazing. Tony Marmo, Arch Fiber, and Dan Ahouse at the top of their list. I started at the bottom. So in case you're confused, they are also a member of the Hudson Valley Economic Development Corporation. They're about developers. Their money does not come locally except for Rondout Savings and Ulster Savings Bank.
Thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
Any questions? Yeah. Jean Lloyd.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Lloyd. I am a homeowner and I've lived here in Kingston for 33 years. I'm here to support my daughter, Charlotte Lloyd, who's a tenant at Stony Run and is also running for the Alderwoman in Ward 1. She wants us all to be able to afford to live here in Kingston. Kingston's housing crisis affects my children and countless other families as well. My children are in their mid-20s, are employed, are trying their best to make their own lives for themselves in the place they've grown up, gone to school, and built personal relationships. Their rents are higher than my mortgage. I've worked for the Kingston City School District, and I've come in contact with many tearful students who say that they have to move. I've been knocking on many doors for my daughter's campaign, and many doors are answered at 6, 7 o'clock at night by young teenagers who are looking after younger siblings. Their parents are not home with them, they're working. They are not getting help with homework. They are not participating in after-school activities. They are babysitting. There are households where couples are working opposite shifts to afford their rent. And there are older people, one woman in particular, she was 92 years old, and she said that she would love to be able to move out of her condo and live someplace else, but she can't afford to live someplace else. Please help keep rents frozen so that people can afford to stay and live in Kingston. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Michelle Hirsch.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michelle Hirsch and I represent Ward 9 Kingston Common Council, and Chestnut Mansion Apartments are located in Ward 9. I was not able to attend the meeting on Monday night, but I did see the data that was provided to you from HCS, and I would urge all of you to take a look at it. And there are a lot of discrepancies in the 5-year change averages. I didn't get to finish all of them, but there's a huge discrepancy in the amount of median income owner occupied households. Their thing is 33%. And the owner occupied, they're just, there's no way these are correct. So
they're not current. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the 5-year averages, the 5-year changes, the percentages. That should be checked. But what these numbers though do tell me is that They don't say a lot about the current ETPA houses, apartments, but other than the number of units in the 5 to 9 category that should have been potential ETPA buildings went down by 299 units between 2016 and 21. And we saw a huge increase of movement into the 10+ units. And according to other ACS data that I can give you, we saw a 33.7% increase of people moving into units between 2015 and 2018 who were surveyed in 2021. So it's a huge amount of movement and a huge amount of pressure on these larger buildings. Also, the median income of renters that is listed on this sheet from HCR is $41,150. So if we were going to have a rent where people in the city of Kingston did not pay more than 30% of their income for an apartment and utilities, rents would be no higher than a range of $1,000 to $1,543 a month. Chestnut Mansion, tenants are just getting organized with For the Many. And I will say that I'm very grateful that that is happening because I don't even recognize the tenants that live there now. That it has changed so vastly in 4 years that I have been the alderwoman. And the tenants that were there when I first got in experienced an illegal lockout and were afraid to organize. Now there are new tenants and they're very willing to step up. So I'm very grateful to For the Many that is helping to unite everyone, because displacement has many negative effects, but it really marginalizes the voices of people here. So I just also brought a couple of apartment listings at Chestnut Mansion. There's a studio going for $1,675, which was previously $1,300. And we have a 1-bedroom going for up to $1,700. That was previously $1,200. So these are over 25% increases.
Thank you, Michelle. I would appreciate if you could send this board by email those figures and those listings so that we can make sure that they're part of the public record. And I would also appreciate it if you could provide an analysis, if you can find time, of the ways that you're concerned about the accuracy of the data provided to this board by DHCR. Sure. I just appreciate if you could get that on paper.
And I just also want to add one last thing. There was a property manager working for Chestnut Mountain and was trying to help fix overcharges and percentages that renters were paying. They were above 20%. And that person was fired from her job for doing it.
Other questions for
Michelle, do you think that there's a correlation between, I know the Chestnut Mansion did not register anything. So they don't register anything, then that you can't go back and check.
They're still beholden though to the law, but these are just anecdotal based on my contact with tenants through the last 4 years.
Yeah, we find the same thing at Stony Brook. And yeah.
Thank you for
other questions.
Yeah, could you just, I know you might, I mean, if you might have time to write something up, but could you say again, like what your concerns are about the accuracy of the data from DHC?
Yeah, just the 5-year change column. The percentages. So
just the calculation.
Yeah, the way they call their calculation.
Yeah. Okay, great. Other questions?
Yes, thank you, Alderman Hirsch. In your communications with your constituents, is this that they reach out to you, issues with their housing costs?
Yeah, I mean, there's people that are still there that I'm still that are in regular contact with me about their housing costs, their fixed incomes, their seniors. They're probably some of the last ones there. It was primarily senior residents
And do you know how many times that property has changed hands in the last 10 years?
I don't know about 10, but it's changed a couple of times in the last 4 years. And there's always people going and looking at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is your, you have a disagreement with the numbers that we were provided. What is your reference source for your disagreement?
Mathematics. Calculator. Which is, if you look at, yeah,
I'll just.
you can even do a percentage, find a percentage calculator on.
Okay,
the
thanks.
internet and those two numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Artek, could you see if there's more folks who have signed up? In the meantime, we missed a couple of people who signed up. Is Michael Caslin here? All right. You're the next name.
Thank you very much. So
Great.
I'm Irene Caslin and I'm resident of Kingston and I'm also, thank you. And I'm a landlord. So we hear a lot here about bad landlords, how they don't do it. I just want to share my story. We came to Kingston, to wonderful Kingston 10 years ago. There is from New York. The reason we had a small daughter and we thought that we would provide a better environment for her. I was commuting for the 5 years to New York. It was very difficult and I thought that I'm a capable woman. I can do something here in the city. And my husband and we took all our investments and we decided to invest in a few multi-units. So now currently we own 24 apartments in the building and we pride ourselves as a landlords. For example, out of 24 apartments in the last 4 years that we own them, we fixed 18. Everything. We fixed floors, we fixed ceilings, updated appliances, etc. I was speaking last year and I totally opened my books. I showed you my financials and I was totally negative for the year. I think it's very bad business. I mean, not that we only not recouped our investments, but we were really negative. But we thought that, we invested and we will try, to upgrade the apartments for our tenants. For example, one of my buildings, 22 Maiden Lane, I have 7 units. I have 2 people who have been living there for 20 years. They rent much, much below market rent. One older lady, she's paying $700, another one is $750. In 4 years, I haven't raised a rent for those tenants because I know they cannot afford it. I know that they will not be able to pay. But I need to also make some money. So I'm raising rents on all other 5 apartments. So I think it's very difficult to regulate something without knowing the business. I'm a small business. I'm not, Stone Run and I'm not Dutch Village and I'm not everyone. I have a maintenance person who, fixes everything within 24 hours. In the smaller kind of cases that can wait 48 hours. As I said, out of 24 apartments, we invested very, very heavily and very modeled fully 20 apartments. What else I wanted to say? Let me take a look at my notes. Oh, everyone talked about inflation. Yes, we know it. We talked about price of eggs and price of, meat. What about taxes has been increased? Utilities has been increased. Appliances have been increased. Labor has been increased. Even city inspections have been increased. So I mean, it impacts all of us, and I totally understand the concerns of tenants. But somehow we need to think about and work together. For example, the city. I have an empty lot in one of my buildings, yes, and I would like to build a building there, but there are so many obstacles for me to put something in, and it just doesn't make sense. For example, there would be a no rent increase. It just doesn't make sense to build anything. So basically, I'm suggesting 5% increase.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Caslin, and for your transparency. How many of your 24 units are ETPA units?
2. 2 buildings and 12 units.
Thank you.
Which buildings are those?
22 Maiden Lane and 130 Smith.
130 Smith.
And I just like to add that all my rents are below market rate.
Did you say 130 Smith?
Yeah, 130 Smith.
And did you file the initial regulation or the initial registration for your 2 ETPA buildings?
Unfortunately, no, because I was away for 2 months, but I'm planning to do that, yeah.
All right, they were due in September. So it's been more than 2 months since, yeah, so that is overdue and the law does require it.
Yeah.
And we will look forward also to filling out the surveys when they come out, because those are the pieces of data that help this board understand in an aggregate way what the actual costs of landlords are. And when those surveys aren't completed, we don't have any information, right? This is thank you so much for coming out. Other questions?
Yeah, I remember you actually testifying at the common council meeting before this, when you were talking about your books. We have never gotten any of that from this board.
It was to everyone, you know, I gave printed copies. I can send it to you, yeah.
You can send that to the mail address. And I second what Alex said, please, there's
Thank you. Harris Safier. All right, we're going to call that last call. And is there anybody else on a sign-in sheet? Nobody else on a sign-in sheet?
We don't have to read these ones.
Yeah, we did plan to read. So I'm going to read a couple of pieces of comment that we have received from people in writing. And if a colleague could time me for 3 minutes and then shut me up at 3 minutes, that would be great.
So this is for each one you want to be shut up?
Yeah, yes, right.
Just for point of clarity, Chairman, you should also ask if they did not sign up to speak, but who may speak afterwards.
Yes, if anyone who has not yet signed up to speak but would like to speak, here's some room on a sign-up sheet. So come do that while I'm reading comments from people who have sent them in. All right, here we go. This is a comment from Michelle Hinchy, Senator for the 41st District, which includes Kingston. As the Kingston Rent Guidelines Board gathers for a vote to set rental adjustments for apartments under the Emergency Tenant and Protection Act, I strongly urge the board to approve a 0% rental adjustment. This will be critical to protecting tenants and providing local people and families with some stability as we continue to take steps to address a housing crisis that has spiraled out of control. In the city of Kingston, where the average rent has doubled since 2015 and local wages are drastically misaligned with these unforeseen increases, renters are facing unprecedented financial hardships, along with a 1.57% vacancy rate and the extreme proliferation of short-term rentals that have made finding an affordable place to live impossible. With the poverty rate in Kingston nearly 50% higher than the US average, our residents are at a very real and severe risk of being displaced amid the interlocking housing shortage and affordability crises. We need our local housing costs to keep pace with local wages and to take into account the skyrocketing costs of living, not to encumber our community members to the point of displacement. We want to keep people living in their homes and communities, and managing local housing costs in a way that recognizes the current housing landscape is a critically important action. I thank board members for taking this testimony under consideration, and I urge that members think critically about setting rental adjustments in a way that will best serve the needs of our community. Sincerely, Michelle Hinchy, New York State Senator, District 41. Another piece of testimony from Andrew and Julie Stavropoulos. Dear board members, I would be present for the Kingston RGB public hearing as I was on October 25th, 2022, but it is my son's graduation. Small landlords who don't have employees face these important decisions all the time. I was called out this past Christmas to my property and New Year's Eve 2021. I'm always on call. As far as expenses go, we have seen everything more than double, from cosmetic items like floor paint going from $34 to $75 per gallon in 3 years, to an electrical service on my personal residence costing $1,200 in an additional 2014 quote to recently paying $30,065 for the same work. I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why all landlords are grouped together and then vilified by being called slumlords and greedy. It finally made sense when I realized that no one is cordial when they are stealing from you. I don't understand some individuals taking a victory lap when the city of Kingston opted into ETPA. No additional units have been created by this action, which is truly the only housing solution. This is only going to hurt small, honest landlords like my wife and I. Below are some examples, including a letter from a previous tenant when he moved out in 2014. In September 2010, my tenant called me to let me know he just lost his job. At this point, we were a single income household with 2 young children, 5 and 2 years old. I talked with my wife and we decided unprompted to lower his rent $200 a month until he got back on his feet. 6 months later, in April, he was able to have things figured out. These tenants have resided in our property for the past 13 years and we hope they never leave. In 13 years, their rent has gone up a total of $100, which equates to 0.62% per year. Their rent is $700 per month below 80% AMI. In fact, all our tenants are several $100s below 80% AMI. To reiterate, small property owners like us are not the problem. In my property that falls under the ETPA, we have a 20-year tenant that lives alone in a large 2-bedroom, $600 below 80% AMI. We did not evict her to increase profits. We had planned to make an adjustment when she moved on. I don't see how this is greedy. Another 30-year tenant in this building is a retired school janitor and Navy veteran. His rent is $815 below 80% AMI. Please tell me how I'm being greedy. I've used the 80% AMI as has been considered affordable rent to illustrate how low my rents are and how they favor tenants in need. Please see the attached letter from Lee Brown, a previous tenant that lived in our property for 7 years with no rent increase. As I requested at the October 25th, 2022 Rent Guidelines Board public hearing, please keep property owners like my wife and I in mind when making the rent decisions, and that no one had to tell us to be empathetic with the people that live in our property. I know that several small property owners have the same mindset. And they included an attachment. And I have
Six seconds.
I'm not going to read the attachment. Here is another letter from Jen Benson. My name is Jen Benson, and I am a member of the Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, and I'm a resident of and a tenant in Midtown Kingston. Mid-Hudson Valley DSA is a member-led democratic political and activist organization fighting for systemic changes that empower working people. Our chapter covers Ulster, Dutchess, and Orange counties in Mid-Hudson Valley. To begin, I would like to thank the Rent Guidelines Board for voting in favor of a rent reduction for tenants in ETPA buildings last year. I hope to see a positive outcome in court and the enactment of the negative rent reduction. I am writing to voice my support for a rent freeze for tenant leases in ETPA buildings from October 1st, 2023 to September 30th, 2024. As a tenant in Midtown Kingston, I've experienced the difficulties of finding safe and affordable housing in this city, as have my friends, colleagues, and neighbors. As an organizer with MHVSDA and a volunteer on Sarah Hannah Shrestha's campaign for New York State Assembly and now for Charlotte Lloyd's campaign for Common Council, I've knocked on hundreds of doors in the city of Kingston and have heard countless stories of the challenges ever-increasing rents are creating for the middle and working class people in our community. Cost of living and specifically rental costs have been the most predominant issue facing our neighbors across Kingston. Our neighbors have had to make choices like choosing between paying electricity bills or paying rent, with many considering leaving Kingston and Ulster County due to the unaffordable rents and the tight housing supply. Knocking doors in Kingston over the last 2 years has made one thing clear. Working people and tenants in Kingston are facing unaffordable rent from uptown to midtown to the Roundabout, and Sarah Hannah's victory demonstrates people are ready for change. While canvassing last June, I spoke with a community member whose rent has risen significantly the last few years, and both the community member and their partner were forced to take on second jobs to make ends meet and to be able to pay their rent. The cascading impacts of drastically increasing rents did not end there. They then faced increasing childcare costs to ensure their children were taken care of while they worked their second jobs. The reality is clear. Longtime residents and families are being priced out of Kingston. The Rent Guidelines Board has a critical opportunity to stand up for tenants and families across the city by enacting a rent freeze for the period under consideration, October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. Rents at current levels are unsustainable for many who live in this community, and they should not have to choose between paying for rent or groceries or childcare. We must fight for our neighbors and not for financial gain of corporate landlords. Another note, this is from Jonathan Bix. My name is Jonathan Bix. I'm a homeowner that lived at 16 Josephine Avenue for 4 years. I support the board's previous decision to reduce rents, and given the current legal situation, I believe the Rent Guidelines Board must keep rents frozen. The value of owners' buildings in Kingston has continued to go up, but regular people's incomes have not. A rent freeze is the only fair choice for the board to make. Another note from Paul Mersfelder. To the Kingston Rent Guidelines Board. My name is Paul Mersfelder. I live at 168 Washington Avenue in Kingston, New York, and have been a homeowner and landlord here since 2017. I'm incredibly frustrated that Kingston landlords have blocked the recent 15% rent reduction for over 6 months now with their lawsuit. As a landlord, I fully support the rent reduction. Landlords' talking point that a 15% rent reduction would not allow them to earn a living simply doesn't add up. I rent out a 1-bedroom apartment with a kitchen, bath, and good-sized living room and dining room for $800 a month. At that rate, I'm able to cover taxes on the property, regular maintenance, and earn a modest income. I understand that that rate is not achievable for many small landlords whose primary income comes from their property, but my tenants have all come to me saying that the going rate for a similar apartment would be twice that. It simply doesn't add up that even small landlords would suffer from this rate decrease given the current market, and it definitely doesn't make sense that the large corporations that typically manage the buildings regulated by ETPA would be unable to make a profit. Any claims to the contrary strike me as bad faith arguments motivated by greed. We will have to wait and see the outcome of that case. Until the rent reduction is restored, I strongly urge the Rent Guidelines Board to keep rents frozen. All of my tenants have come to me in the midst of personal housing crises. Families who live and work here already can't afford the rent. We simply can't have any more increases if we're going to maintain the character of our city. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for reading my statement. Sincerely, Paul Mersfelder. A final statement in this one is going to be long, from Jim Lamb. Good afternoon. I'm writing this email in place of my presence at the public hearing on June 17th to decide rent rates for ETPA regulated rental units in the city of Kingston. Due to previously scheduled plans to spend Father's Day out of town with my toddler son and fiance, I am unable to attend the recently announced weekend public hearing. I hope you accept this email as my replacement for not being able to speak in person at the hearing. As the manager and or owner of multiple small rental property entities and businesses in the greater Kingston area, I am deeply disappointed and greatly saddened by the public comments of the Rent Guidelines Board to announce its intentions to decrease rents without first evaluating and hearing all sides of the matter. It is both irresponsible and ignorant for a professional board to publicly decide on a matter before being presented with all the facts and public opinion. I urge this board to follow the experienced New York City Rent Guidelines Board and make an educated decision to use facts in place of emotions, biased opinions, and political agenda to recognize the increased operating costs of owning a property in New York and increase rents accordingly. The April 20th, 2023 price index of operating costs by the New York City Rent Guidelines Board provides actual and factual information showing the increased costs of operating a rental property in New York. The New York City Rent Guidelines Board received a great deal of real information and performed due diligence to demonstrate a PIOC, a price index of operating costs increase of 8.1%. This increase directly indicates that rents should be increased, not decreased, to offset the burden of property owners. Subsequently, the New York City Rent Guidelines Board has preliminarily approved a 2 to 5% increase for 1-year lease rents. The amounts for 2-year leases would thus be higher at 4 to 7%. The repercussions of an uneducated and hasty decision by this Rent Guidelines Board to lower rents can be catastrophic and would directly contradict all factual information that is being provided. While the common belief is that decreasing rents will immediately help tenants, the facts are overwhelming that the long-term effects are historically harmful to tenants. For the 10% that may be affected by rent reduction, you are risking the increase of rents by property owners to compensate for the loss of the rent for the remaining 90% of units. As a person who was born in Kingston, raised in Kingston, graduated from Kingston High School, who has spent a majority of his life in Kingston and is now raising a family and employing local Kingstonians in various businesses throughout Kingston, it is mind-boggling how this city and board continue to declare war against small businesses and property owners. The issues you and the city of Kingston have are with a small group of large property owners with 100 units or more located on a single piece of property that should not be held in the same regard as most of us small to medium-sized businesses and property owners. Many property owners in the city of Kingston operate 1 or 2 buildings with 20 units and tenants or less and plan to use their building as their retirement and or to supplement their working force wages to live comfortably and not paycheck to paycheck. They are not driving Ferraris or living life lavishly by traveling the world. By controlling rents and further threatening to lower rents, you are discouraging these people and the responsibility they take on to provide housing. Without these small business owners, there would not be enough housing in the city or almost any city in America. The remainder of Jim Land's statement will be available as part of the public record of the DHCR website. Obviously, as chair of the Kingston Rent Guideline Board, I think that we take our work very seriously, and we have been deliberate and diligent in conducting data-based analyses in order to support our decisions. And so I wanted to flag that I disagree with his characterizations of what our work has been. Are there, all right, one more public member of the public wants to speak? Bravin. You got to take this one also. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to provide public comment.
In there so that she can eat as well.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
Trying to, walk around. Yeah.
Against the rules.
Thanks, Brandon.
Sorry, and Bravin, you're here representing an organization.
Yes, my name is Bravin Runga. I'm here representing For the Many. Our role as an organization throughout this process is to help support and provide the infrastructure for the hundreds of ETPA eligible tenants that we organize. But it's the power of their testimony and their stories and their lived experience that led to this board enacting a historic rent reduction last year. That decision was the only reasonable response to address the housing crisis, given the objective data, given the history of skyrocketing rents, and the fact that the vast majority of folks who testified, tenants, homeowners, community groups, testified calling for a reduction. Instead of complying with the legal orders of this board, greedy landlords and corporate real estate sued to block that reduction, undermining this board, the democratic process, and the trust and cohesion of this entire community. While they succeeded in convincing a local judge to block that reduction, the case is currently under appeal. Many of us in this room are party to that lawsuit, and I personally feel confident that a higher court will recognize the orders of this board as legal and that much needed reduction will go into effect. However, while that lawsuit is being adjudicated, ETPA tenants are still facing ridiculously high rents without that much needed reduction reflected in their current rents. And that's driving folks into financial desperation or forcing them from their homes or Kingston altogether. Meanwhile, we've heard reports of several landlords raising their rents in direct contradiction to the court orders that those rents remain frozen. Furthermore, as was evident to this board during your meeting on Monday, only 30 out of the 65 ETPA buildings completed their registration requirements as mandated by law. This shows that some of the landlords, not all, but some, who own ETPA buildings aren't interested in complying with these regulations. They are in fact exploiting the ambiguity of the current situation to further raise rents and take advantage of tenants. And they are weaponizing the courts against the city, against the board, and against the tenants who who live there. Given these bad faith actions by landlords, this board must do all in its power to protect tenants and fulfill your mandate to preserve housing stability. This board must vote to keep rents down, limit ambiguity however possible, and prevent landlords from illegally raising rents. As such, we call on this board to vote to enact a 0% rent adjustment for 1 and 2 year leases, starting between August 1st, 2023 and September 30th, 2024. This board has shown incredible courage to stand up for tenants' rights and preserve housing affordability in Kingston. And now we ask that you do so again. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, so I mean, For the Many as an organization, as I understand it, you work to help organize and support tenants in this process, right?
Yes.
DHCR has informed us that only roughly 0.5% of tenants have filed a fair market rent appeal or like on the name of it, but it's not just rent increase, right? So can you speak if the situation is so dire as you and many other people before the Many have testified that that's the case, why such a low number?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a large degree of ambiguity in this process, right? Tenants don't know what complaints will actually be processed. They don't know which complaints are getting processed, aren't getting processed. There's a ton of different forms to fill out. There's so much ambiguity because of both the lawsuit and because of the nature of DHCR. And like we would call on the agency to better serve tenants and have like more transparency and make most things more accessible. So that I would assume is the reason why you haven't gotten those complaints.
They're working all the time.
Yes, also working class tenants are working constantly and don't have the time to navigate the complex legal requirements that sometimes DHCR require.
Sorry, I'm gonna insist that just the speaker speaks.
Appreciate the fact. Any other questions?
Yeah, Robin, so your organization was helping people fill these things out, right? It costs a lot of money to get back checks and all of that sort of thing. Was that part of the problem? Was, monetary outlay to get, the kind of proof that was expected from the bank? And
Yeah, I mean, like these processes are just like incredibly complex. Like FMRAs are incredibly hard for tenants to fill out, which is why we had to have multiple workshops and talk to lawyers to try and like understand how this works. And I think that, yeah, I mean, separate from this whole process, we definitely want DHCR to simplify these processes because it's inaccessible to so many tenants, and it doesn't reflect the true scope of the crisis. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Would any other member of the public who has not yet testified at this hearing like to offer testimony?
Chairman, I just want to clarify that there was a lot of points being made by everybody tonight. And there's a lot of confusion over some of the forms that need to be filed and what can or cannot be filed at this moment. So I just want to clarify for everybody in the room here. HCR can accept but cannot process overcharge complaints and fair market rent appeals, but nothing in Justice Gandon's decision in December 22 and his February 2023 final decision enjoins HCR from acting on tenant service complaints. HCR is currently obligated to act on service complaints, and for them to hold off on that is a failure of their own making. But tenants still should be filing service complaints.
Thank you, Michael. If there is no further public comment and if there's no other business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Junior makes a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second? Carol seconds it. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, it is 3:29 and we are adjourned.